All right, let's dive into a really fascinating, kind of mind-bending idea about how our memory actually works. We're going to explore this question. What if our memories are less like data stored on a computer and more like actual physical impressions, literally pressed into the fabric of our brain?
Yeah, I know. It sounds like a weird question, right? For decades, we've all thought of the brain as a computer, processing information, firing electrical signals. But what if that's not the whole story? What if we've been missing something huge, something physical, something mechanical?
Okay, so check this out. This is the clue that kicks this whole thing off. On the left, you've got a chart for a standard engineering material. It shows how it bends and stretches under force. And on the right, that's brain tissue. And the pattern is, well, it's basically the same. This one striking similarity just blows the door wide open to a new way of thinking. So, this uncanny resemblance, it really gets you thinking. It suggests that our brains have this mechanical secret, something that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time, that could totally change how we understand the mind itself. Just so we're all on the same page here, a stress-strain curve is super simple. It just shows how much a material, say a rubber band, stretches when you pull on it. Engineers use this to figure out exactly when something will bend, bounce back, or even break. And this is the wild part. Our brain tissue does the exact same thing. It stretches and bounces back, it bends, it even has a yield point, just like a piece of plastic. And let me be clear, this is not a metaphor. This is a direct physical measurement. The brain behaves mechanically, like any other physical stuff. So, if the brain bends and stretches like a material, that leads us to a really radical new idea about memory. Could our memories literally be physical footprints, actual shapes and impressions left behind in the brain tissue from our experiences? This is the absolute key question. Instead of thinking of memory as just, electrical signals or chemical traces, this theory asks us to imagine it as a change in the physical shape of our neural tissue, a literal impression. And that brings us to the core concept of this whole idea. It's called a strain package. A strain package is basically a tiny, stable dent or deformation, a physical strain in your brain tissue. And the theory is that that is what encodes a single piece of a memory. So here's how it would work. Forming a memory means creating one of these physical strain patterns. A big, complex memory, like, say, your first concert, isn't one single pattern. It's a huge collection of all these tiny strain packages. And get this, when you recall that memory, you aren't just firing neurons in the abstract, you're physically reactivating those exact patterns. You're feeling the shape of the memory. But wait, the idea gets even cooler, even deeper. Because this mechanical behavior, this bending and stretching, it's not just happening at one size. No, it's a pattern that repeats itself across every single scale of the brain. It turns out it's what you'd call a fractal pattern. What that means is the same basic rule applies everywhere. The physics that describes how a tiny molecule inside a cell buckles is the same physics that describes how a whole chunk of your brain tissue behaves. It's the same pattern, whether you zoom way, way in or zoom way, way out. And there's evidence for this at every single level. You start at the molecular scale and you see these little filaments inside our cells stiffen and buckle. Zoom out to a single cell and whole neurons do the same thing. Zoom out again to the tissue level and slices of the cortex follow that exact same curve we saw earlier. And then you zoom all the way out to the whole cortex and imaging shows the same response. It's the same pattern again and again. Now, this idea of the brain being fractal, it might sound a little out there, but it's actually not a new concept in neuroscience at all. We already see these beautiful, repeating fractal patterns in the way our neurons branch out like trees, in the complex folds of the cortex, and even in how our brain networks are organized. So this mechanical idea, it actually fits right in. So you have to be asking, right? If the same mechanical rule applies everywhere in the brain, how on earth do different parts do such wildly different things? Well, this is the aha moment. This is where one simple rule explains incredible complexity. Here it is. The big idea. The specialization of different brain areas doesn't come from them using different underlying rules or mechanisms. No, it comes from how they arrange those basic little strain packages into different shapes, different geometries. It's not about the brick. It's about how you build with it. For example, let's look at the sensory cortex. Here, the strain packages are arranged in neat topographic grids. That geometry is absolutely perfect for creating a detailed map of the outside world, like for everything you see and touch. But in the motor cortex, the geometry is totally different. Here, it's arranged in sequential paths. And that shape is ideal for encoding the order of movements, a trajectory, like when you reach out to grab a cup of coffee.
Now head over to the hippocampus, which is super important for memory. What do you find? Overlapping loops. This loopy geometry lets it weave together complex relationships, linking people to places and events in time.
And finally, you get to the prefrontal cortex, the hub for all our higher-level thinking. And the geometry there, it's multidimensional, intersecting, incredibly complex. And that's what allows for abstract thought, for planning, for integrating everything else. See? One rule, different shapes, different functions. It's so elegant. So what we're really talking about here isn't just some new theory of memory. It's actually the foundation for a whole new way of looking at the brain, a framework that tries to finally unify the mind with the physical matter it's made of.
This whole concept of strain packages is a huge piece of a much larger theory called the Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM for short. And its goal is incredibly ambitious, to create a single model that connects the brain's physical structure, its dynamic activity, and maybe even thought itself.
The model really boils down to three core ideas. First, the unified law, that same stress-strain rule is everywhere, at every scale. Second, area-specific geometry. A brain area's job is determined by the shape it builds with its strain packages. And third, plasticity thresholds, that bending point on the curve we saw isn't random. It actually sets the energy level you need to hit to recall a memory. And this quote from the source paper just sums it up perfectly. The specialization of cortical areas emerges not from unique mechanisms, but from the geometry of their strain package motifs. It's all about the shape. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. What if it's all true? What if your highest thoughts, your deepest emotions, your most cherished memories? What if they aren't written in some abstract electrical code, but are literally, physically impressed into the very fabric of your brain?